On the highest shelf of the small workshop, there sat a music box. It was covered in a fine gray layer of dust, a veil that time had patiently woven. No one remembered the last time its melody had sounded in that room, a space usually filled with the gentle sound of tools shaping wood. The box was silent, still. Its lid, with a delicate floral marquetry, was slightly askew, as if it had been closed in a hurry many years ago. The small brass clasp was oxidized, tarnished with the green of forgetting. Perhaps this is just one of those quiet stories, meant for relaxing. And sometimes that's all we really need. Afternoon light streamed through the workshop's only window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The light touched the box's surface, but could not pierce its stillness. It remained there, an object of sleeping beauty, a promise of sound unfulfilled. Around it, other things lived their useful lives: jars of varnish, rolls of sandpaper, chisels lined up in neat order. Only the box seemed out of place, a memory stored on a shelf too high to be reached by chance. Today, that would change. The decision arrived without fanfare, like the morning light that simply is. It was time to bring the box back, time to hear its music once more. The object's silence felt like a small imbalance in the workshop's calm world. With a quiet sigh, a small wooden stool was fetched. Each step was deliberate. The stool was placed carefully beneath the shelf. Hands reached for the box, feeling the cool wood and the coarse texture of settled dust. It was heavier than it looked, a weight of solid wood and of memories held within. Coming down, the box was held in both hands like something precious. It was carried to the workbench, a wide, clear space in the center of the workshop. The window's light fell directly on it now, revealing the full extent of its neglect. The sides, carved with delicate vines, were dull. The wood, which must have once held a deep, warm luster, was now dry and lifeless. An attempt to open the lid confirmed what was already suspected. It was stuck fast. The wood had swollen with the damp of many seasons, sealing the mechanism and its tiny ballerina inside. The promise was clear in the mind of the one holding it. This was not a task of urgency, but of care. The promise was to restore, to clean, to mend what was broken, and finally to wind the small key on its base so the melody could flow once more. The workshop, with its scent of sawdust and linseed oil, would be the perfect place for this rebirth. It was a place where things were made to last, where patience was the most important tool of all. A plan began to form, simple and progressive. First, an external cleaning to remove the years of dust and grime. Then, a careful opening of the lid, without forcing, without breaking. Next, an assessment of the inner mechanism, the gears, the cylinder with its tiny pins, the metal comb that produced the notes. Each step would be taken calmly. There was no rush. The goal was not merely to fix the box, but to take part in its awakening. The sound of silence would be replaced, note by note, with the sound of a forgotten melody. The work would begin now, with the simplest of materials, a soft cloth, a bowl of warm water, and the intention of returning a voice to an object that had waited in silence for too long. The first step was the cleaning, a job that required a delicate touch. Beside the music box, on the workbench, The necessary tools were laid out. A small white ceramic bowl was filled with warm water. Next to it, 2 cotton cloths, old and softened by use, one for dampening and one for drying. There was also a small brush with very fine natural bristles, the kind used for cleaning the details on sculptures. The task began with the dry cloth. It was passed gently over the lid and sides of the box. A fine cloud of dust rose and dissipated in the light. The first layer of neglect was removed, revealing a little more of the dark wood beneath. The cloth turned gray, and the surface of the box, though still dull, already seemed to breathe a little easier. The touch was smoother, less gritty. Next, the soft, bristled brush came into play. With light, precise movements, it was used to clear the carved vines on the sides and the contours of the flower on the lid. Dust had gathered in the grooves of the wood, hiding the depth of the craftsmanship. The brush swept away the tiny debris, revealing curves and lines that were invisible before. It was slow, almost meditative work. Each pass of the brush was a small act of discovery. The sound was nearly imperceptible, a whisper of bristles against the old wood. With the details cleaned, it was time for the water. The first cotton cloth was dipped into the bowl and wrung out completely until it was just damp, not dripping. Too much moisture could damage the wood. With the damp cloth, the cleaning began on the lid, gentle circular motions following the grain of the wood. The more stubborn dirt began to loosen, transferring to the cloth in dark smudges. The true color of the wood began to emerge. It was a deep shade of walnut, with darker grains that intertwined like rivers on an old map. The cloth was rinsed in the bowl several times, the water growing murky as the box surrendered its years of solitude. Each side was cleaned with the same care: the sides, the base, the back. The small brass winding key received special attention. The metal was dark, almost black in places, but the friction of the damp cloth began to reveal a muted golden gleam beneath the patina. After the entire surface had been cleaned with the damp cloth, the second, dry and soft cloth was used for drying. Every inch of the box was gently buffed. The wood, now clean and free of dust, absorbed the little remaining moisture and gained a subtle satin sheen. The touch was completely different now. The box no longer felt like a forgotten object, but like a well-tended piece of furniture. The smell had changed too. The scent of dust and must gave way to a clean, subtle aroma of damp wood, like a forest after the rain. The music box was left on the bench for a few minutes, allowing the air to finish drying any trace of moisture. It already looked transformed. The afternoon light hit its now smooth surface, highlighting the beauty of the marquetry on the lid. The flower, composed of different shades of wood, was now clearly visible. Its petals and leaves seemed almost three-dimensional. The external cleaning was complete. The box was ready for the next step, the journey to its interior. But for a moment, there was only contemplation of what had already been done. The outer beauty, once hidden, was now restored. With the exterior clean, the challenge now was the interior. The lid remained firmly stuck. Forcing it would be a mistake. The old wood could crack, the hinge could break. The solution required patience and the right tool. On the tool wall hung a very thin, flexible metal spatula used for precision work. It was thinner than a knife and had no cutting edge. It was perfect for the task. The spatula was held firmly. Its tip was carefully inserted into the tiny gap between the lid and the body of the box. The metal slid in with slight resistance. With the tip inside, a slow, continuous movement was made along the entire seam. The goal was not to pry, but to break the seal that time and moisture had created. There was an almost inaudible crackling, the sound of wood fibers letting go. The process was repeated on all four sides of the lid. Each movement was slow, feeling the wood's response. After tracing the entire perimeter, a new attempt was made to lift the lid with just the fingertips. This time, it gave way. With a soft, long creak, like a sigh, the lid opened. A peculiar scent emerged from within. It was an aroma of old dust, of metal, and of velvet that hadn't seen the light in decades. It was the scent of encapsulated time. The interior was lined with a dark blue velvet, now faded in places and marked by time. In the center of the compartment, lying on its side, was the tiny ballerina. Her metal base had come unglued from the rotating pin. She was of porcelain, with a pale pink dress and gold details. She was intact, just loose. Beside her, the brass mechanism took up most of the space. It was covered in a thin layer of dust and a few minuscule spiderwebs. The mechanism was a small marvel of engineering. A brass cylinder, studded with hundreds of tiny pins, was positioned next to a steel comb with tines of different lengths. It was the contact of the pins with the tines that created the music. A closer inspection revealed the problems. The cylinder did not turn freely. The gears seemed stiff, likely from old oil that had dried and hardened. The steel comb appeared to be in good condition, except for one of the smaller tines, which was slightly bent, leaning to the side. This small imperfection would surely create a dissonant or silent note. On the inside of the lid, there was a small oval mirror meant to reflect the ballerina as she spun. The mirror was tarnished and dull, its surface clouded like still water. The diagnosis was complete. The box needed more than a simple cleaning. The mechanism needed to be lubricated, the tine on the comb needed to be straightened, the ballerina needed to be fixed back in her place, and the mirror needed to be polished. The little ballerina was carefully lifted from the compartment and placed on a soft cloth on the bench. The inside of the box was cleaned with the same soft bristled brush used on the outside, removing the dust and spiderwebs from the mechanism and the velvet. Each piece was treated with respect, like the components of a sleeping life. The work would be methodical. First, the mechanics, the heart beating of the box, then the aesthetics, the visible soul of its small performance. The open box on the bench was an invitation to a deeper work, a restoration that went beyond the surface. The focus now was the heart of the music box, its mechanism. The most delicate task would come first. The bent tine on the steel comb had to be corrected. One wrong move could snap it, silencing that note forever. From the collection of small tools, a pair of fine-tipped tweezers and an even more delicate pair of needle-nose pliers were chosen, their tips coated in rubber to avoid marking the metal. The box was positioned so the window light perfectly illuminated the steel comb. With the tweezers, the bent tine was held firmly at its base for support. With the pliers, the tip of the tine was gripped with extreme gentleness. Pressure was applied gradually, a minimal and controlled movement, to bring it back into alignment with the others. There was a tiny, almost inaudible tink as the metal shifted. The tine was now straight, perfectly parallel to its neighbors. A single drop of sweat was wiped from a brow. The riskiest part was done. Next came the stiff gears. The old oil had turned to a gummy paste that impeded movement. Everything needed to be lubricated anew. In a small drawer of the workbench was a dark glass vial with an eyedropper. Inside was a thin, clear oil made for clockwork and other precision instruments. It was the perfect oil. A toothpick was used as an applicator. The tip of the toothpick was dipped in the oil, picking up just a minuscule drop. This drop was applied with precision to each pivot point of the gears, on the cylinder's axle, at the points where the cogwheels met, on the mainspring mechanism. Each drop was placed with the patience of a monk. The clear oil slowly seeped into the joints, dissolving the old hardened lubricant. After applying the oil, the mechanism needed to be worked to spread it. The winding key on the base of the box was turned. At first, it offered a lot of resistance. The movement was stiff, almost seized, but instead of forcing it, the pressure was kept steady and gentle. Little by little, the resistance began to lessen. The gears, now lubricated, began to move more freely. The sound of a dry scraping was replaced by a soft, healthy metallic hum. The key was turned a few times, not all the way, just enough to test the movement. Then, the small switch that released the mechanism was triggered. With a soft click, the brass cylinder began to rotate. The movement was slow and steady, as it should be. The tiny pins passed over the tines of the steel comb, and, for the first time in years, the box produced sound. It wasn't a melody yet, as the lid was open and the stop mechanism wasn't engaged, but a sequence of clear, crystalline notes rang in the workshop. Each note was crisp. The tine that had been straightened met its corresponding pin and produced a sound as pure as the others. The cylinder completed one cycle and stopped. Silence returned to the workshop, but it was a different silence, filled with the resonance of the notes that had just sounded. The heart of the music box was beating again. The mechanism was alive and well. The sound was proof that the work was on the right path. The most technical, unseen part of the restoration was complete. Now, attention could turn to the little dancer waiting patiently nearby.
With the sound restored, it was time to return grace to the movement. The little porcelain ballerina lay on the soft cloth, waiting. She was picked up carefully. She was a fragile, delicate object. A cotton swab was lightly dampened with water and used to clean her surface. Dust had settled in the folds of her painted dress and in her sculpted hair. The swab lifted the grime, and the colors became vibrant again. The pale pink of her dress, the golden threads that mimicked ribbons, the black of her tiny point shoes, her minuscule face with its closed eyes and serene smile became clean and clear. The ballerina's base had a small hole, and the pin in the center of the mechanism had a corresponding tip. The problem was the old glue, which had dried out and crumbled away. The residue of the old adhesive was scraped away with the tip of a small blade from both the ballerina's base and the metal pin. Both surfaces needed to be perfectly clean for a new bond. On a shelf, there was a tube of two-part epoxy. It was a strong adhesive that dried clear and would ensure a lasting union. A tiny amount of the two components was squeezed onto a piece of cardboard. With a toothpick, the two resins were mixed until they formed a homogeneous, transparent paste. A minimal amount of this glue was applied to the ballerina's base around the hole. With a steady hand, the ballerina was positioned over the rotating pin. She slid into place with a perfect fit. She was pressed down gently for a few seconds and then adjusted to stand perfectly upright. Now she stood at the center of her little stage, ready to dance again. The glue would need some time to cure completely, so the box was left in peace. While the glue dried, attention turned to the oval mirror inside the lid. Its surface was foggy, with dark spots that age had brought. A clean cloth was sprayed with a solution of water and vinegar, a simple and effective glass cleaner. The mirror was polished with circular lotions. At first, the spots seemed to resist, but continuous friction began to lift them. The cloudy surface began to give way to a reflection. Little by little, the mirror regained its shine. The reflection became sharp. Now it showed a clear image of the workshop, the window, the workbench, the tools on the wall. When the lid was closed and opened again, it would reflect the little ballerina, duplicating her dance in a world of glass. Cleaning the mirror was a finishing touch that brought light into the box's dark interior. With the ballerina glued and the mirror clean, the interior was nearly complete. The dark blue velvet was brushed one more time with the soft bristled brush, aligning its fibers and removing any remaining dust particles. The compartment was now clean and tidy. The ballerina stood firm at her post, her pink dress a contrast against the deep blue velvet. The brass mechanism gleamed discreetly in the light. The mirror in the lid waited for its purpose. The internal restoration was finished. The box was whole again, inside and out. All that was left was one last touch of care before the grand moment. The final stage of the restoration was to polish, an act of nourishing the wood and protecting the work that had been done. In a low, round tin was a special beeswax blended with a little lavender oil. Opening the tin, a soft, calming scent filled the air, mingling with the workshop's woody aroma. The wax was the color of honey and had a firm, smooth texture. A piece of clean flannel was used to apply the wax. A small amount was taken from the tin and spread over the lid of the music box in circular motions. The wood, which was clean but a little dry, seemed to drink in the wax. The walnut color instantly became richer and deeper. The darker grains stood out, and the floral marqueterie gained a new dimension. The wax filled the wood's microscopic pores, creating a protective barrier and a soft, warm glow. The entire exterior of the box was treated with the same wax, the sides with their carved vines, the front, the back, and the base. Every inch of wood was nourished. The work was rhythmic and repetitive. The hand moved in circles, spreading the wax, feeling the surface grow smoother and smoother under the cloth. The scent of lavender and beeswax was comforting. It was the smell of care, of attention to detail. After the wax was applied to the whole box, it was left to rest for about 10 minutes so the wood could fully absorb the treatment. During this pause, a final detail was tended to: the metal parts. The brass clasp on the front and the small hinges on the back were still a bit dull. With a different cloth and a bit of metal polish, these pieces were rubbed. The golden shine of the brass emerged quickly, contrasting beautifully with the dark, freshly waxed wood. The small winding key received the same treatment and was left gleaming. After 10 minutes had passed, a new, clean, dry flannel cloth was used for the final buffing. With quick, light strokes, the entire waxed surface was polished. The excess wax was removed, and what remained was a deep, satin luster that wasn't glaring but reflected the light softly. The music box now looked new, but not in an artificial way. It wore its age with dignity, but was now visibly cared for, loved. The touch of the wood was incredibly smooth and warm. The work was complete. The box was lifted from the bench. Its weight felt the same, but its presence was different. It was no longer a forgotten object, but a piece of functional art ready to fulfill its purpose. The ballerina's glue was now completely dry and firm. The mechanism was lubricated and tuned. The wood was clean and protected. With a feeling of serene anticipation, the lid was closed. It fit perfectly with a soft, satisfying click. The brass clasp was fastened. The box was turned over, and the winding key was slowly turned. The spring offered a smooth, steady resistance. The sound of the mechanism charging was a regular, promising hum. The key was wound all the way, storing all the energy needed for the melody. The box was placed back upright in the center of the bench. It was ready. The moment to hear its voice in full had arrived. The workshop was silent. The late afternoon light streamed through the window, long and golden, falling upon the workbench. The dust that had danced in the air before seemed to have settled. In the center of the bench, the music box rested, its walnut finish glowing softly. The dark wood absorbed the warm light, seeming alive. The polished brass clasp shone like a small star. Everything was ready. The long journey of restoration was reaching its climax. Hands approached the box. With a light touch, the brass clasp was unfastened. There was a small pause, a moment of silence before the sound. Then the lid was lifted.
The instant the lid opened, the mechanism was released. The first notes sounded, clear and perfect. They were as delicate as raindrops on a window pane, each one distinct and pure. The melody was simple, a lullaby or a slow waltz with a nostalgic sweetness. There was no hurry to the music. It unfolded with an elegant calm, filling the space that was once dominated by silence. The sound seemed to come from another time, yet it was present, vibrating in the workshop air. At the same time the music began, the little ballerina started to spin. Her movement was fluid and constant, a perfect circle on her small stage of blue velvet. She turned slowly, her pink and gold dress catching the afternoon light. Her reflection danced along in the newly polished mirror, creating the illusion of a partner. The tiny figure, once still and forgotten, was now the center of a universe of sound and motion. There was nothing left to do but watch and listen. The eyes followed the ballerina's dance, her graceful, endless turning. The ears focused on the melody, following the progression of the notes, the way they rose and fell in a harmonious sequence. The note from the mended tine sounded at the right moment, as clear and bright as the others, a small victory within the larger melody. The music continued to play, a full cycle of the song. It evoked a sense of peace, of order restored. The box wasn't just working, it was expressing its nature, doing what it was made to do. The sound filled every corner of the workshop, enveloping the silent tools, the stacked wood, the empty stool. It was as if the room itself were listening, appreciating the return of that long-lost voice. Time seemed to slow down. Each turn of the ballerina, each note from the steel comb was a moment of pure contemplation. The work of the hands, the patience, the care for every detail, it all culminated in this instant. The reward was not a prize, but the simple beauty of this performance. The music box, rescued from oblivion, was alive, and in the quiet of the workshop, its small, perfect song was all that mattered. The melody reached the end of its cycle. The final notes hung in the air for an instant, softer, before fading away completely. The brass cylinder stopped turning. The little ballerina completed her last rotation and stood still, her serene face turned forward. Silence returned to the workshop, But it was a different silence than before. It was a filled silence, resonant with the memory of the music that had just played. The lid of the box was closed with extreme care. The movement was slow, and the lid settled into place with a soft, final sound. The brass clasp was fastened, sealing the melody and the dancer inside once more. But this was not an imprisonment, it was a repose. The box was no longer forgotten, it was merely quiet, waiting for the next time. Hands lifted it from the bench. The polished wood felt warm to the touch, as if the movement and the music had generated a heat of their own. The box was carried back to the shelving, but not to the high, dusty shelf from before. It was placed on a shelf at eye level, in a place of honor between a few hardbook books and a small clay pot, a place where it could be seen and reached with ease. There, in its new home, it seemed to belong. Its presence was calm and certain. The light coming through the window was weaker now, heralding the start of evening. The music box reflected this gentle light on its dark, lustrous surface. It did not demand attention, but it received it naturally. It was a point of balance and beauty in the quiet order of the workshop. A final look was given to the box in its place. The work was finished. A small broken thing had been mended. A silence had been filled. There was nothing more to do. The workshop settled into the quiet of the coming night. The scent of beeswax and wood still lingered faintly in the air. The final image was a simple one, the music box, whole and at peace on its shelf, saving its song for a new day.